Hello, everyone. What makes a good PM, a good engineer? Insight from PM and the CTO. For this panel discussion, that's the title. So let me introduce myself. I'm a moderator. My name is Yokomichi. I'm a project manager and agile coach supporting the team internally. And let me introduce the panelists for today. We have Mr. Takeuchi, Visional CTO and Director. Introduce yourself, please, Mr. Takeuchi. Thank you. Nice to meet you. My name is Takeuchi. 12 years ago, I started up the company, Visional, and then I've been working as a CTO since then. And from this February, now we have a holding company. So the name is Visional, is a company name, and I'm a CTO for that. And since my elementary school, I've been doing the programming and then living as engineer. Up to now, I am 42 years old right now. Nice to meet you. And Takeuchi-san is a CTO. He is an engineer, and she is also the management side as a CTO. So I would like to have his input from various perspectives. And next is Mr. Niki, the executive officer at Line. Yes, my name is Niki. I am a product manager at Line, dealing with the advertisement and then leading the team for the Line official account. And then according to this theme, we need to discuss what makes a good engineer. So I've been doing a lot of things since high school. And then I started working as an system integrator, or I sometimes worked for the small companies as well. And then I worked with the foreign countries people as well. So I would like to give the input from my experiences. Thank you. And next, I would like to start the panel discussion. So it is very clear what the PM, what makes a good engineer. From the PM standpoint, I would like to ask you. So as you can see here, what is good mean, or what is a good engineer then? That's the first question we would like to ask. So, Niki-san, since you're PM, so please respond. Yes, thank you. A good engineer. Yeah, from the viewpoint of the PM, what is a good engineer? In a daily job, we don't call them as a good engineer. If they do the good job in the project, we call them as a very safe and secure engineer. Mr. Safe and Secure, that's what we call. And why do we feel safety from them? And the calling scheme is not visible. Rather than that, what PM is discussing on a daily basis, the story of the planning, and then engineer, if they can care our delusion or wild ideas, then oftentimes they come up with a nice product. So PRD, PM is writing down those things, and then specification of the screens, not just focusing on what appears on the screen, but they need to think why the PM is asking this. So there are some wet part on a business. They have to understand the culture or background of our conversation, and then propose a good solution for that. That's what I call the good engineer. And I've been watching various projects, and then the PM brain and engineer brain are different. For the PM, they care about the customers and revenue, KPI, looking at the market trend, and then try to find out the solution and answer for the uncertainties. But the development side, it's very static. They need to write the code. And the dependency of the other components. Is it easy or hard to realize? Is this a temporary or is this perpetual? So they have all those different vectors from us. So PM, engineer, if they go forward all at once, and then the customer will ask, can we make this one for us or not? And then engineer will just answer yes or no. It's something like a belt conveyor type of communication. So one step forward, what kind of thing should we create? They need to be more creative and then find out what kind of a solution would be the best. So they should be overwriting what the planning is saying. That is a good engineer to work with. And in case of Line, we have just done the national survey, sending the messages to all Japanese citizens and then asking some questions. And then that was a very good example. So specification was made very rapidly. Line send the message and then open the questionnaires from the link, and we want to get as many as responses from the audience and users. And then why don't we have the questionnaire as a part of the message, and then you can get the response so quickly. So that was the idea of the engineer, and without that, we couldn't do that so rapidly because we didn't know the message can be customized to that extent. We had the assumption that there should be some technical limitations, but that was broken by the idea of the engineer. So these wild ideas and the background needs to be well understood by the engineer, and it worked very well in that case. So in the PM and then engineer, the PM is often decide the scope or definition, and then we just have to follow that. That's the often way they're thinking, and that's different for you, Niki-san. Well, we often tend to make the definition or try to clarify the scope of work. Of course, as a management, it is important to define the specs and the scopes, but engineers should take a look at that and then make another step forward to that. Not just making things according to the spec, but create something additional or based upon the further thinking, what can be provided. And so that is the important thing. And there are people who can do that and who cannot do that as a types of that people. So if you cannot do that, you couldn't transform yourself to the person who is able to do that. So what kind of job should I do? If they think so, they tend to define the things and draw the lines of their scope of work. But they need to think of what kind of thing can we provide based upon my expertise and specialties. And that type of person can give some an impact to the rest of the team. But traditionally, Japan has a system integrator, and there are a lot of engineers who belong to the system integration company, and they are asked, please create this, make this. And we say, and then they say, we made it, and please pay money for that. So that is a tradition or culture. And so they tend to draw the line and try to define the scope of work traditionally. And it is difficult to go work as a mixed team, and they do not look at the product that they made and how well that is accepted. That is kind of the practice. So it will be better if they can change the practice much easier. Otherwise, it's hard. I really understand.
Well, that custom, do you think something can change that? Well, someone who never tried to reduce the body weight needs to do that in order that's the pain, I mean, you need to feel and experience. But I think time is really key. How to spend the time is really difficult to be changed, but then I think that is what we need to change. And also, in this discussion, I think the biggest difference is in how we perceive the risk. And I feel it would be quite difficult to change that because if it cannot make it successfully, well, we would be scolded. Well, that sounds very simple, but that is really rooted in their minds. But together we can say, to change the mind, to say that, well, let's do that and try it out. And if it's a failure, it's not a big deal. But in order to change their main mindset in that way, they need to overcome really like their bitter past experiences with a big jump like a bungee jump. Well, some people were able to do that, not many. But I think realizing why one is now to try to address this risk is something we have to help them understand. I think that's a lot of parts of the role of a CTO. I think, yes, a CTO and management can perhaps lead the engineers into that direction, I think. And Takeuchi-san, you said that some people changed in that way. What did you do to help them change? Well, in the final analysis, well, why do you need to decide all these details? You can perhaps quickly make it 3 days. Why do you need 2 weeks? So vis-a-vis risk, money, cost, budget, or buffers for time, I think it's really psychological for humans. But I just keep asking them why. Not trying to corner them, but just let them self-question. Then they gradually ask themselves, oh yeah, how that much time I'm trying to take? And sometimes I ask them, if you cannot complete it, then who would scold it? Or will your salary reduced? And then I said, no, it will not happen, to try to relax them and open them. Well, some people realize, but less people change, actually. It's perhaps close to coaching. I think finally people, engineers, find themselves, by themselves, their own answers. But sometimes some people never can do that. So is that about you're working facing what, right? Yes. As far as management is concerned, in the internet world, the most important is to deliver fast. Well, it can be fast, but then it cannot meet user experience requirements. So we need to hit the right compromise between the two. Now, in that context, if the bug happens, it's wrong. Of course it's wrong, but there are tolerable bugs and intolerable bugs in the society by and large. So perhaps we can say that, well, it may cause some bugs, but which are tolerable. So within that scope, we can perhaps try to go quick. Well, if you are freshers and you're relatively flexible and open-minded, but then if you started working as someone who receives the order from your clients, customers, then you are much more bound to the deliverable, which cannot be failure. So many engineers in Japan, more than 90% of engineers working in Japan are like that. So one by one, I try to relax them and make them open-minded. And by doing so, I think an engineering capability and the IT capability of Japan as a whole will be able to be improved and boosted. So from various angles, I think I'm trying to do that. Well, when there is a buffer, the buffer is to be exhausted, used up. Well, yes, everywhere. It's like homework for your summer holidays from school. Well, what is interesting is that the team I worked last time is that the team leader is the one who is blaming the most. And, the engineers are saying that it takes 1 month, but the team leader says, no, you can do that within 2 weeks. Well, because if it is the 2-week project, it takes actually typically 3 months. So I think team leaders need to be determined sometimes. And then I think what is most important is to set the right deadline and to share it in order to adjust and coordinate. And well, the development leader in that team was the most toughest person. Well, I think if product can evolve very much in that way of collaboration with the same resource capabilities, and the time spent might be very different, and sometimes it takes double or triple amount of time. I have seen many examples in many organizations, and given the huge number of line users, you cannot afford to make a mistake. But I think being capable of going fast is really important. Well, perhaps our people relatively do not fear too much risk. That's what I have been feeling since joining this company. Well, the system integrators are doing a QCD, so keeping a deadline, meeting deadline, reducing the number of bugs are very important for them. But it's relatively different for engineers at line. So I think being capable of taking some risks is an advantage of line engineers. Well, CTO, as you said, Takeuchi-san, creates an atmosphere where they also share the failures. I think the same is true for PM. If someone is a customers who place the orders and for development, and there are developers can be aggressive towards you, Niki-san, because there is a trust, I believe, and vice versa, perhaps. Niki-san, are you trying to create things like that? Well, I think track record is the biggest, most important and the best KPI. However, basically there are so many uncertainties. We don't know what will be successful, the right hit. So the PM needs to be the most determined person and also needs to be the person who really thoroughly thought about the vision. Because the developers, engineers ask me a question and they wonder if it's really okay. But the planner needs to be able to communicate clearly the vision and what the goal. Otherwise, the developers cannot really share the tension and cannot heighten the level of their tension, and not many progresses can be made. Well, I'd like to go to the next question at that time. Ming, it's from the other viewpoint compared to the previous question. So what is a good product manager from an engineer's point of view? Takeuchi-san, upon previous discussion so far, or not anyway, what is a good product manager from an engineer's viewpoint? Well, Niki-san has been always a good product manager for me. If I try to divide into two categories, broadly speaking, product managers, one is I have an idea, so please make it. That's one. And the other group is let's work together to come up with the best outcome. If I try to break down further, I think we can divide into 3 different groups. And first, toward who as an audience, what kind of experiences to be delivered and how to monetize. Based on that, well, this is what we would like to do. That's the rough image of product, and then concretely what we are going to make. So that make visualization with a design document, for instance, I would say.
So, how can we make it? That's what they think. And then there are these three things. And then we have to draw the line or build the walls in between them. If that is a type of the product manager, the relationship is like an ordering party or owner and then contractor. So this is what we do, and then this is what you do, and then don't make a mistake. That is a message they are trying to say by drawing the line. So they don't think don't afraid making the mistakes, or you can have bugs sometimes. In that case, there is no clear line in between them. The line should be blurring, particularly for this blur. The engineer always think how they make it and what kind of businesses we should make, what kind of a product we should have. That's a more abstract idea for PM, and then what can be created, what needs to be created. And another question is at the how and the where. So if these things are fused, then that will be the very good plan coming up, good ROI. Sometimes you have to spend 3 months, but if you use this, we can do it for just 3 days. So not just thinking what do we need to make, or what kind of things will be the best investment for us. So we have to create the space that the various ideas can pop up. If a PM can offer that type of environment, that would be great. And the responsibilities and the volume and the quality of the responsibility is bigger for the PM compared to the engineer. Engineer would if they say let's have a free discussion, but they need to have the yes from the PM. So that type of mindset, and if there's anything or any mistake happens, it will also be the responsibility of the PM. So that in that way, PM needs to lead the team. I think that is the good PM from the viewpoint of the engineers. From the management, those PM should present the good numbers, good KPIs, right? Yeah. We have the KPI tree. If we analyze those numbers, we can divide them into the quantity and quality. Sometimes they want to increase the percentage, we want to make the new cash point. If they can do this, that is a very good product manager. And through the marketing, we made the quantity, and then we could sell a lot. That is something like a financial game, and pretty much acrobatic and the creative things are not required in that world. So you need to keep the creativity while you are doing the daily job, and think of something new, something additional value, so that the customer can pay more than the current level. The 1% conversion can go up to 5%, according to that plan. That would be great. So if you want to try to make a big home run, sometimes you fail, but you do your job steadily and diligently. But making the home run idea in your mind, and if you could do that both, that would be nice. And that is the type of a PM the company requires. So we're dealing with the products and try to sell the products. We had the salespeople, and salespeople is supposed to sell the product. but in this case, not increasing the quality, but if you have the enough quantity of that marketing power, you can sell it. But in this world, we need innovation, not based upon the quantity idea. So that part should be well understood by the PM and being implemented. And even in this quantity world, they should be able to push up the business in a stable manner. So this is something like how you utilize the time and having the good balance of those two. That will be the good, great PM. I have seldom find these kind of people. Among 100, there could be only 3 or 5 people who can do that. And then from them, half of them, from those 3 to 5, half of them are too much rock and roll type. And it's really hard to handle. They cannot work as a team. And then rest 2 people, 2 to 3 people, are the ones that exceeds that level. They make this. They have the accountability, and that they are pretty much humane, having the good relationship with other people, and then doing the job. So those type of people, I sometimes find those type of people that is pretty much impressive. So having discussion with the engineer, there are not so many PM who can start that type of discussion with the engineer, because sometimes they fear and then they are afraid of their plan will be criticized by the development side. If we have that type of PM that can initiate that type of communication, good communication, do you have that idea? The engineer is making the mechanism and implement it. So when we think of the law, if you have to write the articles of the law, which changes so often, it's not a very good idea. So those change. If you have the very clear vision, and then they are convinced that this is what we are going to create because this is good for our vision, and then that idea should stay in a mind for several years. And then if a PM would generate a lot of engineer ideas, and then they can be shared with the engineers. Why we have these changes. That type of PM would understand why these changes are taking place. So they are pretty much well received by the engineers, I believe. And if they don't show the long-term, mid-term plan, and just to say, let's do this, let's do that. Even though sometimes they make the good hit, but they are not well received by the engineers, I believe. So having the vision or not is one thing, and also they are able to utilize that vision for the project. That is more important. So business and experiences can be imagined by the engineers, and then if they feel this is a good place to go, so the visionary type of a person will be favorable, right? We always say let's tell the story, and if you make the starting the detailed explanation of the screen at the first of the beginning of the presentation, that's not good. So when we think of the discussion with the developer, we think let's have the fluffy phase. And in this fluffy phase, let's talk with the developer about what we're going to do. And that's what we do recently. So to be more specific, vision, we can talk about the vision. Is this right? Is this what you want? And then yes, PM and then engineers are having the discussion. Maybe you can imagine that scene.
But in what meeting does it happen as a conversation? Well, there are very few meetings where such a conversation can happen, actually. So having lunch together and going for a drink, well, it's difficult now due to the pandemic, but I mean, outside of business hours, communications with PM, if that is happening, I think the team has a very good atmosphere. I think that's ultimately sharing the vision. Yes, and just natural conversation can help that type of communication. But if you try to do that officially in a formal way, well, it is more difficult. Well, right. So when nowadays we have to meet remotely due to the COVID-19, so I think that's difficult in that way. So are you trying to address that challenge in a way or another? Well, yes, and in our company as well, we need to share various visions about the new business and such, and otherwise we cannot promote anything. So we have been always trying to meet face-to-face to this chat. We are, of course, trying to protect ourselves from the virus, but even now we are trying to make sure that it happens as much as possible. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages, and sometimes people are just afraid of the virus as a life-threatening danger. So I don't force them. But anyway, for new dream, new innovation, in order for them to happen in the reality, we really have to share the vision. I'm trying to explain that as much as possible, communicate that as much as possible. Once this message from me is received by the team, then I may say or may not be able to say, depending on the persons and the times, let's go then for lunch or so. Well, I have been an engineer, so I think I understand it very well. I mean, it doesn't mean that the engineers do not like that type of conversation. It's not the case. But PM sometimes feel that they are just wasting a time of engineers talking about that type of vision. But engineers also value vision, and then if they understand that, then the vision is important to make decisions. Once they understand that, then they embrace that. Yes, and the communication, verbalizing become much easier once what is the goal is understood and shared. It's much more difficult if we have a pinpoint type of a very narrowly focused discussion. But if we talk about vision, it's much more fun. And then if engineers draw the line, then it would be difficult to have that type of conversation about the vision. So I need to iterate many times the process by starting from a relaxation. Yes, and engineers, they have a mindset where they would like to be praised by friends or family members when they create something nice. We need to value that type of mindset. Yes, I think so. Many engineers like to be popular amongst the small circles. Many of them not very good at going well with the big groups, but they are like that. Well, Niki-san, I'd like to ask you a question. For junior people, it's not immediately easy to be that way, as we've been talking about. Are you trying to help junior people with some messages? Well, the PM is the only person who the engineers can rely on. So if you feel that they are subordinated, it's difficult. And so I think vision can be small. I don't think a big vision or small visions are different from each other. I think visions are visions. Even a small one, we should set it as a goal. And then PM needs to be convinced talking about that. If we are not convinced enough, then they don't buy it. So conviction is really important. And if we talk and they feel that we are not convicted as a PM, then they feel unsure. And the PM is a PM, or junior, fresher, or mid-career, not very much important. PM is a PM. So I think that's the point. Well, thank you. So we don't have much time left. From both sides, we've been having a very good discussion. Many people in audience. I'm sure there are both engineers and project managers in the audience today, and I would like to get closer to the idea and the best that both of you talked about. So can you share some advices from each of you about what we can start improving, even with small things? So Niki-san, from your PM viewpoint, any messages to engineers or to PMs? Yes. Well, PMs, creating story and communicating stories, that's obvious. That's must for PMs. Then based on that, the engineers, please try to read that story. Behind the screen about the specifications, documents, there are those stories, visions. Please try to read and go along with the dreams and the visions of PM. That's my message to engineers. Thank you very much. Now, Takeuchi-san. Well, similar to Niki-san's message, well, tasting for me is a word that I like very much. So tasting like tasting food with your tongue. Imagination world, rather than visualizing that, it's really a dream world. So imagination, and you feel that, oh, that's nice, that's good. So it's really tasting to me. So for instance, there are freshly baked octopus dumplings here. There's a nice broth. It's a light taste, but you can sprinkle some rock salt and then dried bonito flakes dancing. That's so nice. And with mayonnaise, oh, can't resist it. So isn't it nice? So rather than having a picture visualized in your brain, you can really taste it together, right? So imagination world, or in other words, visions. Communicating vision, conveying vision is to show pictures in the mind of the other, but making one step further, you can really feel it, how nice it will be. I think communicating about that, well, mainly by PM, but mutually, perhaps reciprocally, and then engineers should be listening really deep enough so that they can taste. And if that communication can happen, I think the whole team members are really grinning, saying, oh, that's really the best. Really a good picture, beautiful, isn't it? I think that's the strongest team. So perhaps different members were looking at different things, but as a final result, experiences after the launch of product or services are even better than what each one of the team members were imagining at the beginning. If we can do that, I think it's really, really beautiful. Yes, so reading and tasting are so different. Reading, you can say, okay, I understood. But if you try to really imagine truly, I think it makes a difference. So the difference can be made by words and volume and quality of information. Yeah, but words can be limited, can be just too easy. I think there is a challenge we need to overcome so that we can make an extra effect. Well, thank you very much. 40 minutes was very short. Thank you. This is the end of this session. Takeuchi-san, Niki-san, thank you very much. Thank you.